first of all, let's just do a little review. Yep, putting this all together. So first of all, when you multiply by tens, the decimal shifts to the right ones place. So we notice in our example here that we have 9 and 23 hundredths, and if we multiply that by 10, we're basically just moving our decimal over one place. So
and you don't have to write this down unless you really want to.
Yep, exactly. This is more just soaking it all in.
Like a sponge.
Yes. Also, as you remember, if you multiply by 100ths, then your decimal shifts not only one place, but two, because we have 2 zeros here. Exactly. So let's say we had $9.23. If we multiplied that by 100, we would now have $923. Mm-hmm. So basically, the number of zeros on the end of the number is the number of places that your decimal is going to shift. So you might remember how we did our little swooping to help you count those out. And you can still do that if you need to. And just one more thing, when you multiply decimals, you can just start by ignoring them, deal with the numbers first, and then put them back in at the end. Yep. That's the big idea.
So we are going to do some examples, like always. So how can you use that to help you when you're multiplying by decimals? So we're going to think of jump ropes. Okay, so jump ropes are 9 cents each at a garage sale, and you buy 3. Really good deal. They must be used. You buy 3 of them, so how much did you spend? So you would multiply 9 cents times 3. Now, we know the answer is 27 cents, but why? How do we get that? How do we know where to put the decimal? So if you look here, we've got our 9 cents times 3. We're going to think about what we already learned about the decimal shifting, like Mrs. Van Dam just talked about. So since there are 2 spots here, we talked about, first thing we talked about was ignoring it. So if we ignore the decimal first, we're going to solve it. And yes, write these down. So step 1, ignore the decimal and solve. So in this case, 9 times 3, because I'm just ignoring all of that. And what it breaks down is 9 times 3 is 27. So that's step 1. Step 2, count the number of spaces after the decimal or decimals, because you'll find pretty soon we're going to start multiplying decimal by decimal as well. Count the number of spaces after the decimal in the question. So in this case, we have 1, 2. Got them. Step 3, be sure that there are that many place values after the decimal in your answer. So if our answer was 27, I need to make sure I have 2 spots after the decimal. So this would be 1, this would be 2. So my decimal would go here. And that's where I have it. So it's like 1, 2. 2 spots after the decimal. So that is the steps on solving a problem like this, which again, I think you've seen problems like this before, so this should not be new. What becomes a little more complicated is when you have double, which I believe is you. And do they pause this one, or do we do? I think we do this.
Yeah, we'll walk you through this one yet, because you're going to notice that this time we have a decimal here and a decimal here. What do? Well,
harder.
Don't panic, because you're still going to apply step 1. Yep. Just ignore the decimal for now and solve just the numbers. So we have 8 times 3 equals 24. Yep. Just like always. Now, what we want to do, though, is count the number of spaces after the decimals, and we have 2 to deal with. So you're going to notice we have a decimal right here and 1 place value after it, a decimal here, 2 place values after that. So when we look at our answer, we should be thinking about, we have 1, 2, 3 total places after the decimal. So we want to think about that we have the number of place values after the decimal in our answer as well. Now, this is something we want you to really be aware of, though, is, so we get this answer of 24, but I'm looking here and I only see, 1, 2 place values, and we need to make sure that there's 1, 2, 3. So one thing we want you to be aware of, here's our 1 swoop.
That was my attempt at a swoop. Sorry.
Here's our second
about
swoop.
as good as I can do.
And here's our 3rd swoop. What do you think we should add here as a place value holder? Well, as you know from before in other units that we've learned, a good old 0 is the best thing to add. So Here's our decimal, but we have to add that 0 there as a placeholder. So really we have 24 thousandths as our answer then.
Yep.
So that part is a little tricky. We just want to make sure that you understand why we got that there.
Yep.
All right. Now
it's me.
This is a pause, yes.
Yay. Okay. So this one, I know this looks hard, but again, it's just taking what we've done and applying it. So in this case, you're multiplying 14 hundredths times 32. We've got it over here. So the same steps will apply. So please do the same steps. I put the first one up there for you. Ignore the decimals and solve. If you don't remember how to do this, look back at Learning Goal 3 because we taught you how to solve problems like this. So solve it, come back, and we will walk you through how to do it. But please, please, please try. Please. Okay, so step 1, we're going to ignore our decimal and we are going to solve it. So I am going to use the shortcut method just to make it a little bit faster. But again, if you wanted to draw in your rectangles, by all means, please do that, whichever method you're most comfortable with. So starting with 4 times 2, I have 8. Oops, got a little mouse happy. Now I move over to my tens. So 2 times 1 is 2, and I put that in my tens column. And again, I can ignore this because I'm ignoring the decimal right now. Since I am now moving to my tens place with my bottom number, I'm going to leave my placeholder in down here, 2 times 0. I still don't know the decimal, but I did multiply the 2 times 0. So I have my 0 placeholder. Now I multiply 3 times 4, I get 12, so I have my new group here up, and then down here is my 2, so 1, 2, 12. Then I multiply 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is 4, and then again 3 times 0 is 0. And just like when you multiply 2-digit by 2-digit, you add them together next, and we end up with 448. So that is step 1. I ignored the decimal and I solved. So simple as that. If you remember now, though, step 2, you need to count the number of spaces after the decimal in the question. So if you got this far but didn't put your decimal in, pause it and try that. So think about how many places are after the decimal in the question, and then use that to go with your answer. So in this case, we had, again, 2 places. The is 0.14, so I've got 2 place values after it. So if I look at my answer, we need to then, I've got 448, I need to have 2 places after it. So these 2 right here, and then I've got my decimal. So you should have gotten 4 and 48 hundredths as your answer. So again, a little bit harder, but only because the multiplication is harder, not necessarily because of the decimals. The decimal really isn't that hard if you just ignore it.
You just have to remember it. I think that's what's tricky sometimes.
Yeah, don't forget to go back. That would be definitely the wrong answer if you didn't. Okay, and now you have 4 to try on your own. 2 are a little bit easier, and 2 are a little more challenging. So please be careful you go back. Careful that you go back and follow all the steps. Some of them have 1 decimal in them. Some of them have them in both numbers. So just be very careful that you write them down correctly and go back and put the decimal in the correct spot when you're done. And we'll talk about them tomorrow.